All right, I will resume. From the previous slide, what I was just talking about is a child's menu may not offer ground beef, hamburgers cooked to order. And jumping to this next slide, I don't normally like to read from slides, but I'm going to in this case. In the food code, and I don't know if many of you know this, the first quarter or third of the entire food code is all the regulations. And then there's an annex in the back called public health reasons. And for just about every single code in there, there is a reason that they have this as code. And I really felt like this was applicable here. So the public health reason in the annex of the food code is trying to address children who become infected with the E. coli 0157H7. That may not mean anything to you, but that was the bacteria that caused the massive outbreak about 25 years ago in the western part of the country from Jack in the Box that resulted in 4 children dying from eating hamburger that was not fully cooked, and this was the bacteria. So I just want to read this to you from the annex of the food code. And the reason why this regulation came about. Children are at a relatively high risk for infection with E. coli 0157H7. It is possibly the leading cause of acute kidney failure and hemolytic uremic syndrome, HUS, in children. Infection with E. coli 0157H7 can result with mild to severe symptoms such as non-bloody or bloody diarrhea to HUS, which is a condition that includes destruction of red blood cells, problems with blood clotting, and kidney failure. About 2 to 20% of patients that are infected with the E. coli 0157H7 develop HUS. The risk of illness from E. coli 0157H7 in ground beef has been shown to be about 2.5 times higher for preschool children and infants than for the rest of the population. So kind of in summary, precluding undercooked foods from being offered on a children's menu may result in increased protection to children from foodborne illness, particularly E. coli 0157H7, which can result in severe consequences in children. And I'm going to say one more thing about this. I mentioned that outbreak that occurred in the western part of the country from hamburger that wasn't fully cooked at the Jack in the Box location. Something like 800 people developed illness, 4 children died. About 10 years ago, one of the fathers of one of the children that died was moving to the East Coast. He's been a big, huge proponent of safe food, cooking hamburgers thoroughly. He actually interviewed for a job with our company. Diana, you may not know this. And part of the interview is he pulled out pictures of his 18-month-old child with tubes in his body. And the photo was the last photo he had with his child before he passed away from this. So that was a very emotional interview. I think that was the very first interview when I was interviewing somebody else and bawled my eyes out. But this is a very serious issue. And this is why the food code really says do not have those hamburgers on children's menu that can be offered cooked to order. And even if they order for an adult menu, the code doesn't prohibit you from serving it undercooked, but I would not do that because of this specifically. So moving on that bright note, another thing that we adopted in the food code when it comes to cooking, and this has been very, very challenging for people and surprising, is we have a new regulation that's called the Non-Continuous Cooking Regulation for raw animal food. And this is the language that you find in the food code. In our world, in the culinary world, we would refer to this as either par cooking or like grill marking would be an example. I have a handful of clients that do grill marking in advance of an event. So for example, let's say it's a very large event that you might be having. Maybe it's a catering event where you're going to have something like 5,000 people attend. I don't know, maybe a graduation ceremony, and you're going to be serving something like chicken breasts, hamburger patties, steak tips. Generally, when you are dealing with large quantities, and par cooking or grill marking, a non-continuous process is to really help with a process. You can't possibly grill that many burgers or steak tips in advance. So when you are grill marking, that initial heating process, So let's say we're grill marking. You put the hamburger on the grill, you get the marks on one side, you flip it over. That initial heating process may not exceed 60 minutes. Once you have grill marked those items, or maybe you're making something else in which you're par cooking it, you then must cool the food properly, which I'm going to be talking about. Once it's cooled properly, it must be stored properly in a refrigerator. So if you put that product into a refrigerator, it's got to be stored at 41 degrees or colder, or maybe you want to put it in a freezer. It has to be frozen solid. The day of the event, let's say it's 4 or 5 days later, those products must be cooked to the normal minimal internal cooking temperatures. So when those grill marked chicken breasts come out, generally what we do is we take them out of the refrigerator, put a bunch on a sheet pan, put them in an oven. Those chicken breasts must be cooked to 165. Those hamburgers that are part of that grill marking or non-continuous process have to be cooked to 155. Those steak tips to 145. You cannot use the consumer advisory for any products that are going in the non-continuous cooking process. And this is where there's been a lot of confusion for some of our clients. They want to be able to offer those hamburgers that are medium or rare, but they can't grill mark them the day of the event. So it's either one or the other. You've got to cook them the day of the event, or if they're going to be part of a non-continuous process, they have to be cooked fully. The reason why we have these regulations is because it is a very risky process when we start and stop the cooking process. And there have been some situations that have occurred which have clearly demonstrated that this is a problem. One of which is there was a situation where a person was grill marking some chicken that was going to be then cooked off the next day to be used for something. I don't know what it was. So the chicken was grill marked. This person put it in the refrigerator. They knew where it was going to be for further cooking the next day. Next day, this person doesn't show up. Somebody else comes into the kitchen. They see all this quote unquote grilled chicken they assumed was for the salad bar. So we have a not fully cooked chicken, basically raw chicken, being cut and put in a salad bar. So obviously the risk is significant there. There was another situation that I was reading about in which there were hamburger patties that had been grill marked and they were put into a refrigerator. And it wasn't obvious that they were still considered raw because you could see the grill marks on them. Somebody was rearranging the products in the refrigerator and they stored the grill marked burgers above romaine lettuce and salad dressing, and those products became contaminated with the raw hamburger juices. So this is one of the reasons. And also when we start and stop the cooking process, we're not killing all that bacteria, and any remaining bacteria will start to grow and thrive again. So if you do or you are currently doing any type of par cooking, grill marking, you do need to have approval from the health department to do this. You do need to show them written procedures. The procedures do need to identify the products that are not fully cooked. So in one of the places I'm working with, they have one full rack that's just chicken, one that's for hamburger, one that's for steak, and these are marked grill marked chicken, grill marked hamburger, steaks, or whatever. And then you need to identify how they're stored to prevent cross-contamination and that they do require further cooking. If any of you are doing this and you have had discussions with the health department about getting these written procedures submitted, I do have sample templates that's pretty easy to follow and helps you get through the process so that you do it properly without the risk of making people sick. So that was my cooking little spiel. The next step, so we've purchased, we've received, we've kept it cold, we've prepped it, we've cooked it. Now, let's say, just for example, getting back to that beef stew that we've cooked, we've got to keep it hot. All hot food must be held at 135 degrees or higher. Now, one of the things you're going to notice at the bottom here, I've had people ask me, and this is based on what we had talked about last week. We know what the temperature danger zone is, 41 to 135. We also know that our TCS foods sitting between those temperatures, between 41 and 135, is technically safe for at least 4 hours. However, you can't just willy-nilly let your food sit out for more than an hour. That's our pretty much our law in Massachusetts. If you do want something to sit out, and there are certain situations where you might want to have food sitting out. You're having some type of a buffet, or you're a pizza shop and you make 100 pizzas at 11 o'clock and have them sit out and sell slices at a time. You have to get permission from the health department. You have to submit SOPs for using time as a public health control. I mentioned this here because at this point we have talked about cold storage and hot holding or hot storage. I don't want to go into a lot of detail here because this is something that I'm going to reserve for next week, but I want you to keep in the back of your mind that although we know, you've heard this in your Serve Safe classes, that food is safe between 41 and 135 for up to 4 hours, you cannot do that unless you get permission and have written procedures in writing that are shared with the health department. So the next step, we've held it hot. We are going to cool it because we're going to serve it another day. And this is another situation where I need my entire screen. So I'm moving that little box to the upper left-hand corner. So when it comes to cooling, I'm going to say these words very deliberately. And in my food safety classes, I tell people, write this down. I want you to write this down before I say anything. But these are the time temperature requirements, and I'm slowing down because it's a little confusing. When you are cooling foods, it's that beef stew, it is the stock, it's the red sauce. Let's say it comes off the stove or it comes out of hot holding. It's probably going to be hotter than 135. It might be 180, 150, 140. At that temperature, sitting on your prep table is perfectly acceptable. It is out of the temperature danger zone. Once you get that down to 135, we have to have that product in the active cooling process, which I'm going to be talking about. In terms of time temperature requirements, once it hits that 135, and I'm going to point to my screen, once it hits that 135, it must get down to 41 or lower in 6 hours or less. So I'm drawing an angle, drawing a little line, a diagonal line. Once it hits 135, it needs to get to 41 or lower in 6 hours or less. That's the first part. The second part, so it has to get from 135 to 41 in 6 hours or less, provided that, this is my second part, we can bring that product to 70 or lower in 2 hours or less. And if we do a rewind to that picture that I had of a thermometer, you may remember the little zone in red, which I referred to as the extreme danger zone. The extreme danger zone is 70 to 125. So if we can get through that zone very, very quickly, then from that 70 to 41, we have a little extra time. If we get to that 70 in less than 2 hours, let's say it took 1 hour to get to 70 degrees, and we still have up to 6 hours to get that product to 41, that means in the second step, the second stage, we can actually cool that up to 5 hours down to 41. This is always very confusing. Before I move on, does anybody have a question? And Diana, if anybody wants to put their hand up or write a question or even unmute themselves and ask about this, because I probably 100% of the time in my classes, I get questions about this. Does anybody have a question?
Don't see any raised hands. If you want to raise your hand, you'll look at the bottom of the screen. There should be a reaction thing where you can raise a hand like that.
You just repeat that again?
Yes, I always get a repeat. Can you guys see my fingers? Because I use my hands a lot to describe this. You might not be able to. When you are cooling, you must bring that product from 135 to 41 within 6 hours or less, provided that you can get it to 70 or less within 2 hours. So there's really two parts. The first big part is the whole process cannot exceed 6 hours. So it has to go from 135 to 41 in no more than 6 hours. But another critical component of this is you need to get that product through the most dangerous zone very quickly within 2 hours or less. Once you do that, then as long as you don't exceed 6 hours to bring it to 41. Did that make any more sense repeating it? Or can I say it differently? Or do you want to ask another question?
Oh, that was perfect.
Okay. It's confusing. People get confused by this. And I get it. And I talk about in our SurSafe classes, you have probably heard about the 4-hour rule. The maximum time my TCS foods can sit in the danger zone is 4 hours. And then all of a sudden I'm telling you, wait a minute, we've got 6 hours. It is a little confusing, but if you wrote it down, you got it. In terms of ways to cool foods, there's multiple methods that we can cool foods. And I have another video of 2 of us from the company demonstrating proper cooling procedures, and I wasn't able to get a copy of that, so I'm going to have to verbally describe here and show you pictures here. But whatever you can do to cool foods quickly, you've got to cool foods, especially through that most danger zone down to that 70 degrees. So one of the best ways, and Diana, I just realized I messed up with your questions.
That's fine. I can add in this question before we go into this cooling part. Just okay. So there's going to be one more poll.
Should we do it right now?
Yeah, I just started it, so it should be on everybody's screen now. There's 2 true or false questions. And let me know if you can't see it, but it should be started. So I'm not seeing any participation just yet.
And I kind of gave you the answers. So if you were sleeping at the wheel, I didn't give you the answers.
There's a system check right here to make sure everyone's awake and paying attention. Right.
And I can see your questions.
Awesome. We'll do it for a couple more seconds. And I wait till we hit around 70. We're at 68%. So we just need a couple more people in there.
All right, everybody. Get the questions. These are good questions.
Yeah, it's probably harder on the phone. But yeah. Okay, so we hit 72%. I'm going to end the poll. It looks like we did a pretty good job. Can you see the answers, everybody? So
I cannot, but that
okay.
Might because I'm the presenter. What'd you get?
So the first one, true or false, refrigerators are designed to cool hot food quickly. 6%, so 2 people said true. 34 out of 36, so 94% said false. False is the correct answer. And then the second question, true or false, before cooling food, reducing the size will allow it to cool faster. And 100% said true, and that is correct.
Good job, everybody.
Oh, there we go. Now I click share so you could see it really quick.
Yep. Very good. Very good. Good job, everybody. So as she just said, a refrigerator is not a way to cool foods. It's intended to keep cold food cold. Sometimes we can cool in a large walk-in cooler in shallow stainless steel containers, but as a general rule of thumb, some of the pictures that I have up here are different ways that you can cool foods before they go into a cooler. So one of the best ways, reduce the quantity. And to me, this is obvious. The greater surface temperature, the more the product will cool. So obviously, this huge, big tilt skillet here, if we try to cool it in there, it'd probably take a week to get it down to 41. So break it down into multiple smaller containers, reduce the quantity. Stainless steel containers are going to be a much better conductor of heat. And I am telling people this all the time. They can't cool their foods. Well, stainless steel is going to work so much better. I'm sure some of you have these rapid chill ice wands. I was recently doing a SurSafe class, and during our lunch break, I went back into the kitchen and they had a whole bunch of these. I said, oh, I was so excited. You have the rapid chill ice wands. And they said, yes, we use it to cool the iced tea. And I said, what do you use to cool the, I don't know what it was, soup or something else. And they said, oh, we just throw it in the refrigerator. So the intent of these is to fill this with water and freeze it in advance. You can fill it with ice cubes, and then it's used to cool food rapidly from the inside out. Another piece of equipment, which is really cool, is either a blast chiller or a blast freezer. And the way that I describe this to people is it's basically a reverse microwave. It can cool and or freeze something much more quickly than putting something into a refrigerator or freezer. Most people do not have these because they are incredibly expensive. But for some operations who do quite a bit of cooling, it ends up being worthwhile. And it actually can save the quality of the product, and product may last a little bit longer, which means they may have less waste and it might actually pay for itself in the long run. But anyway, but ice cubes would be another way. And I was working with a place in Boston many, many years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago. It was a cute little pizza shop, and it was this Italian family that was running it. And the mother in the shop was making her own homemade red sauce, and they were not cooling it properly. Health inspector came in and said, you really need to put ice in it. And they put ice in it. And obviously you put ice in a red sauce, it diluted it and it affected the quality of it. So they were very creative, and I was so impressed with this. They ended up making red sauce ice cubes. What they did so that they didn't dilute their red sauce is they would make their red sauce and then they put it in these hotel pans, very shallow, like an inch to an inch and a half, and they would put it in their freezer. And just before it's completely frozen solid, they would cut it up into little red sauce ice cubes, and they used those ice cubes to cool future batches of red sauce. And I thought that was genius. It wasn't my idea, I wish it was, but it was a great way. But whatever way you can do it, as long as it's safe and does not contaminate the food, is the best way to go. With cooling, I'm missing a picture. This is what I was looking for. I take a ton of pictures when I'm out doing an inspection. And this is an establishment I was really excited about. The only recommendation I would have had is that they use stainless here instead. But when I talk about cooling in an ice bath, this is what I'm really looking for. A lot of times when I see people cooling foods, they might just have the pan sitting on top of ice cubes. That's going to do absolutely nothing except possibly cool the very bottom layer of whatever is they're trying to cool. What we really want is a container, an outer container that is larger than the inner container, so we can fill it with ice and water. An ice bath is ice and water. It's not just ice. And then as you can see from this picture, and I don't remember what this is, it might have been cheese sauce. I don't even remember what this was. But you can see by looking at this picture, this water ice level was up to the level of the food in these containers. So not only were they cooling from the outside in, the level was appropriate, the product was fully submerged in the ice bath, and they were cooling with these rapid chill wands from the inside out. I was very excited about this. I had to take a photo. I know from looking at their logs and working with this establishment that they were able to maintain those time temperature parameters, but to make it even faster or safer, I would have made the recommendation that they use stainless steel here. But this was a great setup, so I had to share this picture. The very last thing that I wanted to talk about is reheating. I think I'm missing, oops, you know what? I'm going to have to delete something here. Hold a moment, please. I'm going to stop sharing because I just realized I had a little problem with my slide. I do apologize. So Diana, now's my time for a technical difficulty.
Oh, good.
You're not the only one. I'm going to first delete this so we can see what I'm talking about. I don't know how I did this, but we will come back to this. So I want to make sure that everybody can see my slide with the cooling. Oh, sorry. And I was very excited about my animations. There we go. Can we see that for my reheating?
You have to share the screen
again. Oh my goodness. Welcome to Zoom world. Sorry about that. Let me get back up here. Okay, we're going to share screen.
There we go. Perfect.
And you can see, so let me do this, play from current slide. All right, back on track. Can everybody see with the reheating, the time temperature parameters here?
I can see it.
Excellent. So reheating, there's two things I'm going to say about reheating requirements. Number one, if you are reheating food that is going into hot holding, it must reach 165 and you must be able to get to that temperature within 2 hours. Here's something people always question me about, and I'm sure I'm going to have questions about this. If you are reheating for immediate consumption, there are no temperature requirements. And this is where everybody says, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? No temperature requirements. Reheating for immediate consumption, there are no temperature requirements. And I'm going to use an example to help illustrate this point. And I'm going to use Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is next week. Oh my goodness. Let's go through the turkey here. We receive a turkey. We receive it at, I'm going to go through this, 41 degrees. We store it 41 degrees. We prep it. We cook that poultry to 165 degrees. Maybe we keep it hot, but we're going to cool it. We're going to put it in a refrigerator. The next day after Thanksgiving, I believe it's law that you are required to serve turkey sandwiches. So turkey sandwich, you got the turkey, maybe you put the cranberry sauce, maybe the stuffing in a sandwich. Perfectly acceptable to serve those cold turkey sandwiches. I have very, very sensitive teeth. I do not like biting into a sandwich that has cold meat or stuff in it because it hurts my teeth. So as a customer, I say to you, you know what? Love the sandwich, but can you just zap it a little bit? Put it in the microwave, 15, 20, 30 seconds. Just bring the temperature up a little bit, and then I'll consume it immediately. The reason that is okay, if that turkey has been cooked thoroughly, cooled properly, held cold, I can just heat it enough so that I can tolerate the temperatures on my teeth, and getting to that, I don't know, 90 degree, 100 degree temperature in such a short amount of time doesn't allow for bacterial growth. That is why reheating for immediate consumption has no temperature requirements. However, if you are going to be reheating for hot holding, so that turkey is going to go back into a steam table or chafing dish, you need to bring it up to temperature. Does that make sense to everybody? I don't know if you want to do a hands up or everybody unmute and say yes, move on. I just want to make sure that concept is understandable.
Here, quick, unmute might help. I see a hand up.
Were there any questions? Shall I move on?
I think you can.
Okay. The picture that I had to delete because it was covering up the words here is I had the a picture of a warming unit that had the big no sign through it. And the intent there is reheating cannot be done in a warming unit. Most warming units, unless it says it's a cook hold or a cook warmer, are just intended to keep hot foods hot. So I see this all the time. People put mashed potato or rice or whatever in these warming units, and it never gets hot enough, and it sits there around 120, 130 degrees, perfect temperature for bacterial growth. So reheating must be done in the proper containers. It can be done on the stove, in the oven, in a microwave, in a fryer, any cooking piece of equipment, not in a warming unit. So I just wanted to stress that for everybody. The very last thing, and we're doing good with time here, is serving. Believe it or not, there are temperature requirements when it comes to serving. And really this is for those servers who are maybe monitoring a buffet. So any buffets should be monitored, not only for customer contamination of buffets, and that's a whole nother topic, but if there is a buffet that maybe has soups and salads and pudding and stuff, all hot food in the buffets need to be hot, 135 or higher, and then everything cold needs to be 41 or colder. So this is all of my time temperature issues when it comes to the flow of food. The very last topic, and this will allow us some time for questions, is proper thawing. Proper thawing, there's technically only 4 safe ways that we can thaw frozen food items. Probably the best way, I would say, is thawing food in the refrigerator. The problem with this is it does take advanced planning, and we don't always have advanced planning. But since Thanksgiving's coming up, just to give you kind of a rule of thumb, for every 5 pounds of product that you are thawing, it requires roughly 1 day in a refrigerator to thaw. So for example, if you're thawing something like a 25-pound turkey or a roast, it could take up to 5 days to thaw. We don't always have advanced planning. So other ways that we could thaw frozen food items, and the example that I'm always using in my classes is something like frozen shrimp. You get a call at 9 o'clock from your supervisor, and your supervisor tells you, I forgot, at noon, we've got a party coming in. They would like some shrimp cocktail. This is what they've ordered. 9 o'clock in the morning, you know that you have a bunch of frozen shrimp in your freezer. Couple things you could do. One is you could put that shrimp in cold running water. It needs to be fully submerged. The water needs to be continuously running so it gets rid of any of the particulate matter, and it needs to be 70 or colder. 70 is cold. If you put your hands in 70-degree water, it will feel very cold to touch because you are almost 100 degrees. If you don't do that, you could put the shrimp in the microwave, provided that it goes immediately into the cooking process. And although I cannot see your faces, I'm sure there's probably a dozen faces out there that cringed when I said put shrimp in the microwave. When it comes to food safety, all I'm concerned about is the food safety. If you serve rubbery shrimp, that's a quality issue, not a food safety issue. And then the fourth and final way is cooking. So that shrimp, those frozen shrimp, could be put into boiling water. And we use cooking all the time for frozen products. Frozen ravioli, they go directly from at home, my freezer, to boiling water. Or French fries will go from freezer, we slack them, and then they go into the fryer. So that's perfectly acceptable ways to thaw frozen food items. This is, I believe, my very last slide. And this is one that's probably going to elicit some questions here. But this is also new in the food code. When it comes to thawing, and I had to separate this from all other food items, if we are thawing ROP fish, and this is reduced oxygen packaging fish, and I have two pictures of smoked salmon that's in, it's usually done in a Teflon bag. It gets put in a Teflon bag. It goes into a vacuum packaging machine that sucks out all the oxygen. If you're going to be thawing any ROP fish, it must be removed from packaging immediately before thawing in a refrigerator. Or if you are going to be thawing these products under cold running water, you want to remove it either immediately before or immediately after you thawed. This is the second time I'm going to talk about the food code and the annex in the back called public health reasons. The issue with vacuum packaged fish, like you see here, is that there's a possibility of having what it shows on my slide, and you may not see it. The issue is Clostridium botulinum toxin formation. I'm going to say this in layman's term. There is a risk for developing botulism. If you don't know what botulism is, very briefly, it is probably the most lethal of all foodborne illnesses. It is acquired by consuming foods that have been in a lower or no oxygen environment that produces a toxin. When you ingest this food, it is associated with neurological symptoms. One of the symptoms, which is often what people used to die from before we had mechanical ventilators, is something called descending paralysis. And what that is a paralysis that starts at one's shoulders, working its way down their body to the point where they cannot breathe unless they have a mechanical ventilator. So this is the risk with fish that has been vacuum packaged that has not been under time temperature control or has not been thawed properly. So what we have here, and you may not be able to see this, so I'm reading this to you, is for processors. So seafood companies, their control for this bacteria is they either freeze it, they refrigerate it, or they refrigerate it with chemicals such as salt that will help with their water activity levels. If freezing is the only control measure used by these processors, and look at the packaging, it will often say keep frozen or keep frozen, thaw immediately before use. When you see this, this requires that if you are going to be thawing it, in refrigeration, that you completely remove it from packaging before thawing. And this is going to help prevent this bacteria from producing this toxin. That was a lot of information in one slide. Does anybody have questions about this? And I'm guessing if you do have a question, it's for those of you who do receive this product, but long description. Let me just go over this again. Anytime you're thawing any fish that's in any vacuum package bag, you need to remove it completely from the packaging before you thaw in a refrigerator because of the risk of botulism. And I see this all the time. And when I see this, I'm very, very strict with my clients, saying of everything that I see in this restaurant right now, this is the thing that gives me the most worry here. So because of botulism. I have gone through all of my time temperature. I'm probably a minute or two over time, but I want to reserve the next 5 or 10 minutes for any questions that anybody might have regarding everything that I've covered today. And I am actually going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see people and see if any hands go up. Make sure everybody's still awake. It's not quite 6:30. Waving, thank you very much. You're all, at least the people who are showing their faces are still awake. I appreciate that.
Yes, if anybody has a question, either raise your hand. There's not too many at once. You could also just unmute and start talking. Questions?
I got a question about cooling down products.
Yes.
So when everything goes into the walk-in and 2-inch hotel pans, technically it should be covered, correct?
Oh, I forgot this part. This is what the code says. Thank you so much, chef. Sitting in your office right now, I can tell with your chef's jacket. This is the only time that food can really be uncovered. So there's 2 ways that we can do this. If there is complete protection overhead, and sometimes I'll have people put a sheet pan over whatever is that's being cooled, completely uncovered, because when you cover something, you are keeping that heat in. It will not cool properly. So you want to keep it uncovered, especially if there's no overhead contamination. If there's a possibility that it's going to be some overhead contamination, put some food wrap and then puncture or like open up little holes so that the hot air can escape. Excellent question. That was a big point that I missed in my cooling. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Nice to see you again.
I thought you looked familiar. Your tiny little face on my screen.
Elements Cafe, 2005.
Oh my goodness gracious. How are you? This
Very
is
well.
always a reunion in these classes because I've been doing this many, many years. Very good. Anybody else? Anybody else want to say hello from years gone by?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat room here. No hands up.
I think we're good. It's about 6:20. We have one more session next week. We're going to be talking, I believe what's on our agenda. I'm going to go back to this very quickly and jump out of here. I'm talking about some of the specialized processes. Let me jump up here real quick. I know I'm not sharing with you guys. I'm just going to look at this. So next week, I think we were talking about the new requirements for date marking, another area where there's going to be discussion. Using time as a public health control. I briefly covered that a little bit tonight. And then just some of the simple stuff that many of you are familiar with, but setting up a 3-bay sink, your sanitizing solutions. And then I have, if I can get it uploaded, a really exciting video on why we need to have cleanup procedures for vomiting and diarrhea. So that's where we'll end next week. So have a good Monday, everybody. Have a good week. And thanks for staying awake Monday night for food safety topic.
Thank you, everyone. And we should have a recording available. I should have them all from last week and this week should be up hopefully next week at some point after the last one. So
thank you.
Thank
you, Lisa.
Thank you.
No problem. Any questions in the meantime, feel free to email as well.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.